Hello.
What's up, everyone?
Good evening. Also, today, before we forget, it's St. Patrick's Day. I don't know if you've noticed, but Joe's wearing green.
St.
And
Patrick's
I'm
Day.
wearing.
Woo! And
This
I've
is the
seen we've
green
got
outline.
Angela in the comments. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Angela.
Yeah.
Great to have you with
So
us.
happy St. Patrick's to all the. Is it Irish?
I'm part Irish myself. Happy St. Patrick's Day to me too.
Well, I'm married to a part Irish, so I guess it counts. Anyway, so welcome to episode 22. Already 22 episodes. This is great. We can't wait. So tonight is a little bit of a special one. So we are here, the two of us, but it's not really just going to be us on the session. Now, if you've seen the social media, you will see that we are all involved in the session tonight. We are doing a Q&A to wrap up the relationship series that we've been doing for the last don't know how many weeks, a few weeks.
A while now.
Yeah, and we've asked Pastors Ian and Rachel to join us as well. So we pre-recorded that and we will play it later on. That will be the session for the night. So we're all active in the comments. Now, I think it would be good if you want to get us some questions that we've not answered, feel free to send it in the comments. We'll be happy to answer if we can.
Definitely.
Now, Joe, how was your week?
It's been good. Tiring. Busy week. Busy week this week.
Yeah.
It was even a bit of a manic rush getting here today. It's definitely getting to the point where I need barbers open. Hence,
the beanie.
It's trust me, you lot don't want to see it today.
No, you don't.
But yeah, other than that, it's been cool. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's good. We both have a few annual leave booked off to have a long, really rewarding weekend because it's just it's getting to the end of lockdown and a lot of things, and we need this little boost. So please, if you feel like that as well, put in the comments so we don't feel alone. And if you feel free to boost us as well, just do it and we'll be happy to chat with you. I believe Joel's just about to show the social media.
Here we go.
So we have the Instagram, the Facebook, and obviously the website where you can find the information about Bright City. And on Spotify, now this is really cool. Every month we put out a playlist. I don't know if you were aware of that, but if you're not, please go on the Spotify and find the playlist. We've put out one every month since December. It's our personal taste. Sometimes we go to guest requests from other people. So feel free to listen to and to subscribe to all of the social medias. And also now we have the recap of last week.
Great episode
session.
Last week.
Yeah, it was about resolving conflict in marriage, and not just in marriage, with Sam and Charlotte.
Enjoy.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody. Episode 21.
21. Can you believe it? My session tonight is called He Said, She Said. I mean, it stirs up some images in your mind of basically people having arguments. The reason why I wanted to do this session, and mainly it's about communication within marriage, but I also want to caveat that and say that it's not just about marriage, because communication obviously is everywhere.
Everyone needs to know how to become good communicators and how to resolve conflicts.
Proverbs 15 verse 28. So the heart of the godly thinks carefully before speaking. The mouth of the wicked overflows with evil words. Yeah, it's really important to think about the words that we use when we're communicating with other people, no matter who that may be, because you can obviously cause a lot of damage, but you can also speak life and you can speak truth. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that is taking place. And now, isn't that so true? Like, you think you have conversations with people about maybe like the nitty gritty stuff, and you maybe personally come out of that feeling better. Maybe you basically just dumped it on somebody else and you feel better about it. But actually, communication is a two-way street.
How many arguments start with, or it comes up in the first few minutes of an argument, I thought I told you.
God wants us to be able to communicate well with each other. He wants us to be able to communicate well with Him. If we are talking all the time to Him and we're not listening, that isn't a two-way relationship. Listen to understand and not to respond.
We're not just listening for a gap in the conversation to jump in and get our point in.
So if you're really struggling with a friend or a colleague or your spouse or someone that's in your life, ask God to reveal who that person is to Him.
that was a
Great
really good
session.
session. Yeah,
Yeah.
great session from Charlotte and Sam. So if you haven't watched some of the sessions or any of the sessions from the relationship series, we highly encourage you to do so, because we covered quite a few different topics. We covered the basics, we covered dating, being engaged, being married, things amongst all that,
Singleness and then communication last week.
Mm-hmm.
So much of it is intertwined, so much of it sort of relates to one another.
Yeah.
So definitely there might have been a certain topic that piqued your interest that you just wanted to tune in for that, but I would recommend try and check them all out, because there's a lot that can sort of go between each sort of topic.
And you might know us all better as well, because I think for this kind of series, we kind of shared a lot of personal things as well. So if you're interested into knowing the team better, you better watch it. So we're going to straight in dive into the pre-recorded
Q&A.
session, the Q&A. We covered some topics as well that maybe we haven't really talked about, but what we did for that is we just gathered your different questions that you sent us, and we tried to answer our best those questions. So if there's something that we haven't answered, if there's a question that arises during the discussion that we've had on the Q&A, please feel free to send it in the comments, and we'll try to answer it the best. And also, you know, other people can jump in and add things. It's always the beauty of church. We're all Christians, and we can all, you know, comment and discuss things together.
Yeah. So the way we've done it tonight, because it's a pre-recorded episode, we've got the whole team live watching this in the comments. So if you've got any questions, any bits you want to add to any of the specific questions that we're going to touch on, let us know in the comments, and as the team we can jump in, we can try and maybe touch on some of the points you're raising. You'll also hear me reference at some point in this video, I think towards the end, about another video that I'll play to do with Charlotte answering the question. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the video ready in time for this episode, so when that bit comes up, don't worry, we won't be able to play that. You haven't missed anything if you don't see that video coming. But it was a good question. I'll leave it in suspense. It might be something that we bring up.
Oh, we're not going to say it.
Nah, let's leave it in suspense. We've
got
enough.
Maybe someone will ask the question in the comments anyway.
Definitely. Charlotte's in the comments, I think, tonight. So if you really want to know what the question is, drop her a comment.
You can go directly to the source.
Cool.
Just as a warning, it might go a little bit longer than the 1 hour slot, but it won't be 2 hours. So please bear with us, and it's a very interesting discussion. So we hope you'll stay with us until the end.
Enjoy. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We're now officially recording the Q&A session to the relationship series. Yep, claps all around. I think it's been a very cool series, and obviously we're all hoping that this Q&A will hopefully tie up some loose ends. You were saying before, Tanya, relationship series in general, we're never going to answer all questions. That was never the plan, but hopefully we've been able to cover a good amount, and this Q&A will hopefully be able to answer some of the bits that we've had. So we put out the questionnaire for people to send in their questions. We've got some really great suggestions, and we've come up with a list of questions that people we wanted to get the answers to, and we will try our best to give those answers. And as always, as we've said in every episode, we're not claiming to be experts, we're not claiming that we're perfect at all of these things, but we're sharing what we believe God tells us in the Bible. We prayed before this episode, and we're just praying that the Spirit leads us. So,
and we've got the pastors for accountability.
We've got the pastors with us, exactly. So what the pastors say,
goes.
All right. So speaking of pastors, we had a question that we wanted to start with, and we're gonna go to you, Pastors Ian and Rachel, first. And that question is, how did you both meet, and how did you both know that you wanted to marry one another?
Sure, okay.
I should say ladies first, but I'm going to kick off.
It's a good start, isn't it?
Yeah, because interestingly, I'd just really not long become a Christian. In 1989, I got saved, and I was at the hospital as a student nurse, and Rachel just arrived at the same hospital as a student nurse in the beginning of '90, and after I got saved, I was going along to the hospital Christian fellowship with the girl that led me to the Lord, this other student nurse, and and Rachel walked in. So I could only have been, I was probably less than a year saved. Yeah. And so think about that. I mean, here we are together now. And to be honest, if my daughters had brought a guy, oh, he's just got saved, Dad, and we want to get married, I'd been so, what? No. But,
baby Christian.
but, because you're thinking, well, are they going to stick with it? Is this a... But we started. Yeah, I remember Rachel came in. She interestingly, she had this little tape player, and walked into the fellowship, and she must have asked somebody about it. But she put the tape on the tape player and sang this song to the group, and I was sort of wow, that's bold, and it was a nice song, and I remember the song even now. It was. It's your stubborn love that never lets go of me.
So basically it was, that was how we met. And your second part of your question was, how do we know? Oh, that's a tough one, isn't it? How do you know? How do you know that this person that's walked into your life is the one that you're going to marry? I don't know how, to be honest with you, in the sense of, when I was actually, interestingly, coming off the back of a relationship that I'd been in for 3 years when Ian walked into my life.
I was on the rebound,
and I actually thought that was the guy that I was going to marry.
Yeah, you did.
So it's a bit confusing, isn't it? Life can sort of throw you some curveballs. So I moved to London purely on the basis that I was thinking I was going to marry a guy who was at Bible school in London.
He was a 6'2" blonde guy.
He was, and and so then he ended up sort of breaking the relationship with me just before I arrived in London. And so I did find myself in the middle of London. I just started my nurse training, thinking that I was there, and actually that God had brought me there because I was going to marry this guy who was at Bible school there, and then I find myself single. Just as I kind of plant myself up the road from him. And that was an interesting one for me, but it's great in hindsight, and I was talking about this today with someone, if I hadn't have met that guy, I'd never have moved to London. And if I'd never moved to London, I would never have met Ian. And so sometimes, you never know what God is doing. And when things don't necessarily work out in one scenario or one relationship that you think is going to, don't be afraid, don't worry. You never know what actually God is taking you to next. And actually I ended up meeting Ian. I'm so grateful that I went through that experience with dating that guy before, and I ended up meeting my husband through that relationship anyway. And how did I know that Ian was the one? I don't think there's any big sort of angels from heaven that came down and went, this is the one. I think, you just have a real peace. It's a decision, and it's a choice that you make, that you're going to make this work anyway. And
yeah, there was a kind of, there was an obviously a falling in love, and there was also a kind of both wanted, similar things.
Yeah.
We wanted to serve God together. We both wanted to serve God, rather. And I think it's, there's that prompting, would you commit yourself to this woman? And would obviously Rachel thinking she'd commit herself to me. And when you know and you feel that God is prompting you to do that, I seem to remember, I forget, it was probably me said, I think I'm falling in love with you, I said to her one time. and that was my little sort of tester, see what came back. And she said, oh, I think I'm falling in love with you as well. Yeah. So I thought, oh, that's good. I'll carry on. And no, but because I think both as Christians as well, we didn't want to we didn't have a long courtship, did we? Once
No.
we were thinking, well, we better wait till the end of training. We weren't far into training, but it was, interestingly, it was Rachel's nan, who's 101 years old just a couple of days ago, said, well, what are you waiting for? Why are you waiting? Why don't you get married now? And we sort of looked at each other and said, why are we waiting? Yeah. And we got married. Yeah. And the rest is history.
Yep.
That's a lot.
We got a grandchild now.
Wow. No, thanks guys so much for sharing. And I think particularly what you're saying in terms of there was no angels calling out from heaven or these shining lights. I think that's a big one because
I mean, some people do,
Yeah.
We Simon Marshall talked the other week about he met Rachel and straight away God told him, this is the woman you're going to marry, before he even knew her. So I think it can happen, but the key then, the common thing is to be aware of what the Holy Spirit says. And if you have a relationship with the Holy Spirit, whether it's just a big piece or if he's telling you straight away, this is the woman or the man you're going to marry. But all the stories have happened because we've had a personal relationship with the Holy Spirit and we were listening. So I think, that's definitely for me a key.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that one. Yeah.
And I think as well, just it sounds like whether you heard from God and he's told you this is who you're going to marry, or you just think, a bit like you two were saying, you're with each other, you're putting out some testers. I think it just gets to a point where you have to make a choice, don't you? And think,
yes,
you do. And I think if you have any doubt, one of the things in life, of course, any decision that you make that's a big decision, and you ask God, look, Lord, show me, give me some, really show me that this is, the right choice that I'm making. Of course he's going to answer you, and of course he shows you, because that's the kind of father we have. And I was quite young at the time. I was probably about 19. I really didn't have that grasp of that idea that I could actually ask God, to give me a definitive sort of yes, and get a sense by Spirit, because I didn't have that sensitivity to the Holy Spirit back then. And I'm just so grateful that God helped me anyway, and regardless of my ability to be able to tune in to the Holy Spirit, because he's so loving, he's so good as a father, he really will direct your path. And I surrendered my life to God, and I knew that, when I'm in, I knew I had a sense that it was right, but I didn't necessarily have an absolute, clarity. And I think that that's the goodness of God, that, he generally has his hand on your life. And
I think for those who are in a Christian family or a Christian environment, church and things, there's also the the help of those around you. There's your parents who would generally sort of say, he's a good guy, or this is a lovely lady, and they help you with that confirmation and decision. Of course, not everyone has that, and therefore, in those situations, you're really relying on the leading of the Lord and other confirmations. But that's a big one, your family and friends.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. And we've got a sort of a question now that is almost the opposite of that, and this is to do with singleness. And this came up during the singleness episode that Tanya and Jade did. And I think it's probably something that a lot of times can come up for single people when they're viewing married couples, because what you're going to see a lot of times from the outside is, it just looks great, the companionship, and they're always with each other. And I think it wasn't just one person that was saying, how do you deal with loneliness and being single? So Tanya, if I can sort of go to you first, maybe to take us away with that one. But what advice would you give for dealing with loneliness and being single?
Absolutely. And I think it's such a real question, if that makes sense. It's often people don't be authentic with themselves. And I think the feeling of loneliness isn't uncommon to any human being. I think every one of us have experienced that. And for someone to feel comfortable to ask that question, I really have to honor that person, or the many people that would have asked this question. I think right off the bat, I think it's important to establish the fact that singleness is, marriage is not a solution, is not always a remedy for loneliness. And I think that there's often this misconception that when I get married, I will never be lonely again and the sky will always be blue. And really and truly, when you really watch, I'm not saying like I haven't seen good marriages, I do, but even in the best marriages, there are these days where you have difficulties, and there are these days where you even experience loneliness. One person was sharing with me not long ago. And so with that being said, I think that, viewing loneliness as a human condition rather than a singleness condition, if that makes sense. I think that first of all, we need to know, understand how it comes, and just really not just look at it as a singleness issue, if that makes sense, and then we can take it from there. Because there are some married people that are thinking, that have that same perception where they're like, okay, when I get married, I'm never going to feel lonely, and then they're finding themselves feeling lonely in marriage. I think we set ourselves up. So that's why I feel like we just need to establish that from the beginning. I think when you accept the fact that yes, loneliness is something that we all experience, it takes away from it being this huge thing. I think sometimes when you feel like you're the only one going through it, it seems like this niche situation. But when you accept that, okay, I'm not the only one that has felt lonely sometime in my life before, and that should give you some reassurance. Although loneliness is not of God, I don't think that it's healthy in that regard, but it's normal. It happens. So, but knowing that there's nothing drastically wrong with you when you feel lonely, again, that's a reassurance. Being open about it. The first thing for me is admitting when I felt some form of loneliness. I feel like acknowledging it and saying, this is how I'm feeling is the first step, because then you're able to do something about it. But if you never sit with yourself and actually figure out, I'm actually doing this because I'm lonely. Sometimes people act out doing things that they wouldn't normally do, but they're actually, the symptoms that they're presenting are actually because of a loneliness condition that they're feeling. And so I think, again, acknowledging it is another thing that I would recommend. And then for me, I think talking about it to someone who you trust. When I've done that, it's actually given me some perspective to realize, okay, I don't have that somebody there, that special someone in my life, but I have all these friends around me. So having someone to talk to brings that sense of perspective, because when you're in this place of loneliness, it almost warps your vision and your view of life, and you feel like you're in this tunnel. And when you just have someone to talk to, it's like, actually no, I just get the picture of Elijah, in the tunnel, and he's like, God, I'm the only one that didn't stand up to Baal. And God was like, no, there's, I don't know the number. He's like, there's others out there. Don't just think it's just you. So I think that's really helpful. And I'm sure there's other things I could say, but I don't want to speak too much. But yeah, that's my sort of few things I wanted to share about loneliness. Yeah.
I mean, Tanya, I don't think any of us can really top the answer. I think that was a brilliant answer. But I mean, does anyone else have anything they would add, even if it's advice for anyone out there who's feeling very lonely, particularly as a single person?
I would say one thing though, Joel. Last thing, I'm not so sure if I'm a fan of people getting into relationships if they're single. Sorry, if they're lonely.
Okay, all right.
If you're single, you are the ideal person to be in a relationship. No, I mean, getting into a relationship because you're lonely. I don't think that we should do. That's not, for me, a healthy reason, because I think, again, you're setting yourself up because you're putting this massive expectation on this person to solve something that may not even have anything to do with them. So that's one thing I'd say, yeah, as advice as well.
I think as Christians, we can always go to God.
Yeah.
And he's the only one that can solve these things. It's not, if I'm being lonely, it's not Joel that can solve that for me. Obviously, there's companionship there, but he's not my savior.
Exactly.
So though he's my spouse, we're not each other's savior, and the only one that is that is God. So those times where we're in the dark place, yes, people around us can help us, but sometimes when you're so lonely that you can't even, get to that place when you feel like you've got people around, it just feels so dark. So just go to God.
Yeah, completely. And I really like what you said at the beginning, Tanya, that loneliness is a human condition. It's something that we all face. It's not something that comes upon you because you're single and leaves you once you're not single. And there's pros and cons. As a married man now, I'd be lying if I said you don't have companionship in a marriage. That would be a lie. But at the same time, I've had moments, like we were just saying the other week, this lockdown's been really hard for me because I'm a very social person. I've missed seeing my friends, doing things. And despite having an amazing wife, I felt incredibly lonely these last couple of weeks. And if I didn't have a good relationship with God, that could have actually been even worse for me in my mind than if I was single, because I could have been thinking, well, I've got an amazing wife, yet I still feel lonely, so it's hopeless for me.
Right.
So I'm not saying that I cannot understand why you would feel lonely if you're single. It makes complete sense. But like I think you're saying, you can't just believe the myth that it's only by being single you feel lonely.
Absolutely.
And like you're saying, if you try to remedy it by just being with someone, you could end up in a situation where you're either feeling more lonely than ever before because you don't even feel understood by that person, or you just put too much pressure on that person and you could end up with a very messy relationship indeed.
Yeah, I think, brilliant answer, Tanya. Totally agree. And, as you said about loneliness being a human condition, and I think God even sometimes wants us to get into a place, not where we're unhealthily lonely, but where we're kind of away from the busyness. And he says, be still, come away, be alone so that you can be with me. And sometimes, God might use these times to draw us close to him even. But I think, if you're feeling that real sort of pain of loneliness, then if you can, try and reach out to somebody, let somebody know. And I think also as the saints, as the family, the church family, we must all, be on the lookout for one another, love one another, make sure that our friends are in a good place, check on them. And if we see any signs where people are, we're knowing, hey, they're not being themselves, they look a bit low, let's kind of go out of our way and check that they're okay.
Yeah, and I was sort of thinking as you were talking, if I think of myself in a relationship, have I ever felt lonely? And we've been married, we've been together 30 years. And yes, of course I have felt alone. And I was thinking loneliness is not just about, it's not always about a physical being on your own. Sometimes you can feel alone on your own in your head with all the things that you're going through. Do you know what I mean? And you feel like you're the only one that's carrying those things. So it can almost feel like a loneliness within yourself. Does that kind of make sense? And not necessarily a physical presence, but actually the sense that you feel like you're the only one that carries these things. And you feel alone with the sort of, I suppose, the weight of maybe the responsibilities that you're carrying, your job, your work, and actually nobody can help you with those things, and that can feel quite lonely. And actually that is a time when you kind of think you have to give it to God, isn't it? And actually you kind of lay those things down, and actually I find that that's how I sort of relieve myself of what I struggle with in my loneliness, is sort of saying I'm not alone dealing with these things, because Ian can't help me with everything, and even though he's physically there, I can feel alone with the problems that I'm working with. Does this make sense to you? And so I guess that's how loneliness can affect those that are actually with other people, and yet we go to the Lord and we give it to him, and I can feel that sense of like he's with me, he's got me, he's carrying me. And that's actually where I feel the presence of God. But I think about even in Genesis where God said it's not good for man to be alone. He knows that. He knows we need companionship. He knows we need to be around people.
I completely agree. Well, staying on the topic of singleness, I'm going to come back to you, Pastor Ian, for another question that came up, and it's, do we need to do more as a church for single people? And it's quite, maybe also if you could touch on what our understanding of church is as well, because I think that can come up a lot, as in the church, but
good,
in different things to different people.
Sure.
But
I think, if we think of church, what do we mean by church? Well, we've got the church of, let's say, Bright City Church as as a kind of joined family together, you know, a community who kind of doing life together. And then you've got the wider church, you know, the church as a whole, the church in general across even the globe, or even you've got the church across, you know, a community, the churches across the town. So there's different ways of approaching this with the church. But thinking about this one, you know, I think that the best thing that we can do for this this kind of factor of single people, and maybe, you know, how can we help single folks maybe get connected? And I think that there are sort of you know, there are some thoughts in certain circles that, well, you know, this can be difficult, single people getting together within the church. And I would say the best thing we could do is have a really healthy church, you know, winning young people and reaching young people, connecting to young people. If you've got a church that's brimming and buzzing with all sorts of young people coming to the Lord, and you know, and a healthy church in that way, goodness me, there's people all over the place. There's single people coming together, and there's vibrancy, and you know, then there's much more opportunities for, you know, couples to connect, and and so I think the best thing that we can do, even as a church, even Bright City Church, is to you know, relate to young people, to bring the gospel to young people, to connect with young people, and just have a church that is brimming with young people. That's one good thing we can do. I think also to have great relationships with other churches, and to be actually doing activities together, meeting, connecting. And then there's a kind of, you know, there's a kind of cross-pollinating, which is really healthy. And for so many reasons between churches, you know, and I mean, I think of, we had Tisha was living with us for years as a kind of, you know, young lady, teenage into young lady, and we were going over to Life Church and doing stuff. When I say we, you know, as a kind of youth ministry and stuff, and she hooked up with Terence, who was there, you know, doing youth ministry over there, and they're married, they've got 3 kids. That was a kind of real kind of cross-pollination, you know, and natural things. I think of, you know, Joel and Canal. I don't know how you met, but of course you come from different kind of churches. And so I think the more we can, you know, it's very healthy to be integrated with other churches and in community with them. You know, then you're encouraging that. Now, what about, you know, single people in general, not trying to match everyone up. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But I think, you know, having healthy sort of family groups, life groups, community groups, however they may look. And I think of, you know, the Unsubscribe kind of group, and active, you know, and it's young people coming together, both married and single. And I think, you know, to have lovely kind of family groups where you feel a part of something, you belong, you know, so you never really, you shouldn't feel alone. And I mean, the word of God says that God puts the lonely in families. You know, we being part of a church is belonging to a big family. And I think belonging to, so for me, I think, you know, those kind of smaller group life, home life together with others is hugely important for that. That can also help, you know, all of us feel like we belong. So there's a few thoughts there. Any others about kind of? Well,
singleness is all sorts, isn't it? Single.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be 45 and single. It's not that young people. It's
no.
You could be a single parent.
Absolutely.
You know, and be, you know, you could be single when you're a widow. My dad's just become a single person.
Yeah.
So I think that's the one thing, is to get rid of the concept that singleness is about being 18, 19 and 20. And actually it affects all sorts of age groups. I'd be interested to know, because I've never been single, and I always wonder as a church leader whether or not sort of putting singles into one group is a good thing. And maybe you could answer that, Tanya. You know, like, you just put them over here. But what I do, you know, like, there's some sort of weird group, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, which
and
doesn't
actually,
seem
even
right.
listening to us, what we're saying, it's almost like we're putting you over into one weird group. And I think that actually we've got to open our minds up and have a much broader idea of what singleness is, and actually educate ourselves as leaders.
Yeah.
Because actually we can come in and we narrow it down to this little niche. It's this little group of teenagers or these little 20 and 21-year-olds. And actually singleness is really vast. You could be a single parent, you can be a widow, you can be a single divorcee. And actually, how do we help that? I think one of the things that the church can be quite guilty of is just concentrated on married people, that everything revolves around being married. All the preaching, sometimes all the teaching, all the conferences, it's all regarded around two people together, and I'm getting lots of shakes from Tanya. And and I think we need to be much more intentional about how we actually involve single people, and actually single people need to educate us who've never been single. That would be my approach. We need to listen better, hear better, understand better, and actually be told, what is it that you want? What is it? How can we help you? Rather than maybe coming up with what we think you want, because actually we don't know.
Well, also, every one of us was single here, for different lengths of time, weren't we? So let's try and put ourselves back in those shoes as well. It's a natural. Go on.
Sorry, I think it's beautiful that you guys are open to have the conversation, because I feel like not Bright City Church specifically, but the church worldwide, I feel like we make singleness and relationships this sort of, I don't know, I think we need to, like you said, re-educate ourselves. But speaking from experience, I think some of the teachings on relationships and singleness, it was really like, the moment you like someone, you have to start thinking about getting married to them. And I feel like that's unhealthy. Like, can we just foster healthy ways to get to know people and not put pressure on single people to marry the first person they just talk to or say hi to? It's normal to like people, and things don't go anywhere. I think, and it goes to all of us. For me, I need to re-educate myself on how to do relationships in a healthy and godly way. Because I guess the fear, about you have to marry them is obviously not wanting to have things happening outside of marriage. But I just think we've gone the opposite side of the spectrum, that it's just now so almost not artificial. It doesn't make sense. So I think it's all about education.
No, amazing answers. And I know we've got we'll do a follow-up session at some point, hopefully later this year, around the sort of singleness topic as well, because this is such a huge one, but I think already even just what's being discussed is really, like you're saying, Tanya, it's just insightful, it's open, and I think there's a lot more amazing discussions that can be had for that. Next question now, and this is going to the other end of the spectrum, back to married couples. Canel, I'm going to ask you to lead on this one. How do you do your finances as a married couple? And I'll preface that by saying, finances are a big deal, particularly as a married couple. And I know before I was married, a lot of things people were saying to me was, make sure you have some idea how finance is going to happen in your marriage, because money is one of the biggest conflict things that come up within a marriage. And so I think it's a very good topic to speak on. And Canel, if I go to you first, it's weird asking you about what I know, but how do you do your finances as a married couple?
So to start, there's a lot that can be said about finances, and then we did a session earlier this year as well on finances, which gives some very practical tips that can be done within marriage as well. But to go more into marriage, like Joel said, it's so important to deal with finances in a healthy way, because the number two cause of divorce in married couples around the world is finances. The first one is infidelity, second one is finances, and then the number one cause of arguments within a married couple is finances. So knowing that is obviously a big deal, and then no one's immune to have issues, whether because you're blessed and have a lot, or you don't have a lot, but either way there's a lot of issues. The way we've done our finances is quite different than a lot of things we've seen before we were married, but we took that decision because we talked a lot about it before we were married. We talked about our debts. We talked about our financial habits. I think it's very important to talk about financial habits. There's a lot of people that say it's good to recognize who is the spender and who's the saver in marriage, because if you don't know that, if you don't talk about that, it's going to be more messy than it needs to be. But you know, if you know one of you is the spender, one of you is the saver, you can kind of join your weaknesses and strengths together and make it work. If you're both the saver or both the spender, you also need to be aware of it, because you need to build together better habits, you know, to work together. And then before we were married, we saw some couples that did everything very separately, but we saw the issues that came from that. And then we also saw people that did everything very together and they didn't really have a lot of freedom sometimes, and we saw issues. So we decided we wanted to do together, but every single thing we do is very budgeted. We decide about it together, and in that we also allow ourselves to have a personal allowance that is mine to spend the way I want, is Joel's to spend the way he wants. It's part of our global married budget, but that means that there shouldn't be issues there, because if I want to spend on something that Joel will say is ridiculous, who cares? It's my money. But it has evolved since we've been married, you know, seasons of where we have more, seasons where we have less, seasons where we can't do that, but because we constantly communicate about it, I think it's a key as well. You need to constantly communicate about it, because things can change depending on the seasons. When I lost my job, we didn't have as much, so we needed to be more on it. Another thing as well I would say is sometimes a reason why it can be hard to do it together it's not because you don't want to have a joint account. It's because there's a deeper issue. So you need to understand the deeper issue. Is it because you don't trust each other, or is it because you have secrets about your own personal finances? Whatever the reason is, the reason for not wanting to do things together is not just because you're like, oh no, I'll do it together myself. There is often their reason behind, so you need to know why and deal with that reason. Because when you get married, you become one. The Bible's very clear about it. You become one. You're one entity. You're one person. And finances need to kind of look like that as well. However way you want it to be done. There's not just one single way you can make your finances be one together in marriage. And the husband is the head of your family. Us as wives, you know, we submit to our husband. Now, it doesn't mean that whatever Joel says, I have to do exactly that, even if I think it's not good. Because if Joel really, you know, does his job as the head of our marriage, he also takes my input into it. So we communicate, and I give my input, and then I also have to trust that what he will decide ultimately is with God's by his side, you know. So not to say that because he's the head, he takes all the decisions, even if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't take my input into it. No, we do. And it might be that some couples, the woman, the wife is more suited to deal with the finances, you know, maybe because it's more her area and less the man. But at the end of the day, the husband is also the head of the marriage. So you can't just do your thing separately and not get that thing from your husband. So that was like a short thing, but I think it's important to get healthy habits, communicate. If you're not married yet and you're going into that, or you will be, make sure you deal with it before you're married. Take a decision before of this is how we're going to do it. If you realize when you're married, or maybe it doesn't work, readjust it, but you've already started the healthy habit of taking those decisions together and communicate about it. If you're already married and you might realize, oh, maybe we don't have the best the healthiest relationship with our finances within our couple, then it's never too late to reassess it. If you don't know how to start, where to start, there's lots of experts, or you could go to your pastors and they could guide you, or, you know, to other couples. But it's really important to have those healthy habits, and to remember that you will win if you're a team, but you won't win if you're not a team, and marriage is a teamwork.
Yeah, and I think as well, quick one that I think definitely helped us is, number one, bit like you were saying with singleness, Ian, that sometimes when we're in our worst place, that can be what helps us draw near to God. And a thing that I'm actually grateful for is me and Canal were really, really broke when we met each other. And we don't come from a background where we used to having lots of money anyway. So it could have gone one or two ways. It could have gone a way where we had like a real, almost like poverty mindset and just didn't know what to do with our money. But thankfully, we kind of thought, no, do you know what? We know what it's like to have nothing. So we can't really be too attached to this thing called money. And we know that we've got by without it.
Yeah.
But then secondly, it's about, like Canel was saying, having that adaptability and just making sure things can change. But when you know that, a big thing for me was just trusting in God to take care of myself and my marriage. It hasn't come easily, but I've been working on it a lot. It helps massively, because when you're trusting God will take care of you, it stops money becoming the overriding thing that's dictating your life. And like we've shared it a few times in different avenues, but we've had a lot of challenges, not directly financially, but with Canel's health, with her not being able to work, with job situations, and definitely out of human nature, the thing that comes up first is you're so scared that you're going to lose your house, you're not going to be able to like pay rent, to put food on the table. It's hard. And I took a lot of like stress at the beginning, because I was thinking, oh, that's on me. I've got to be the breadwinner for everyone. And I was doing loads of jobs. And yeah, it was not until I really took a step back and thought, no, God, I trust you. You took care of me when I was single and had no money. Why would you not take care of our relationship? Yeah, and that freed me up to then actually take care of my wife, instead of letting the stress dictate and almost being harsh with my wife, because I'm thinking, you don't understand. I'm working every hour that God sends to try and put food on the table, and you're trying to say you need to spend time with me. And I can literally understand and see now why money causes so much conflict within a marriage. And the truth is, it doesn't need to. Like Canel said, you're a team. Money will cause problems in your life if you don't have it, but it doesn't need to completely destroy your marriage. You can tackle the thing together. And I feel that when your mindset's right and you realize that money isn't your God, it's not the thing that dictates. Like I said, I can honestly say, hand on heart, when we've had times where, for example, I was the one earning and Canel wasn't earning, it means nothing to me to share my money with my wife. It wouldn't even occur to me that, what, but I earned all this money, but I'm giving you the same amount, or this and that. And I can only give credit to God, because again, just certain principles, and the main one being, do you know what, God, you took care of me with nothing anyway. So it's a blessing if I get money. If anything, you just allowed me to have it for a time that I can use it for.
Yeah, we take decisions together. I think that's the key. Take decisions, whatever the decision has to be. But yeah, you work as a team. So you can't work as a team if then one of you takes the decision and the other one just suffers this consequence, or finds out, I've heard of stories where it becomes so much of a problem. And like Joel said, there's no need for that. And all the advice that you can get as, dealing with your finances when you're single, take that as well into account into finances when there's two of you or more, because it doesn't cancel it. The healthy habits you can get together, deal with it. If you're single, if you're not married yet, also start now to deal with the issues that you have in your finances. If you have debts, if you have bad habits, deal with it as soon as you can. And if you're already married, it's never too late to start dealing with those issues, because it can't take over too much of, and the bad thing that can happen is divorce, and we've seen it. Is the number 2 cause of divorce, and there's no need for that. So.
Definitely. And be 100% honest with each other, because you'd rather be honest and have arguments than keep quiet and have a divorce, in my opinion. And be real. Me and Canel realized early, do you know what? We've got the situation where we're both spenders in certain ways, but there's a downside that comes with that, is that if we're not careful, none of us would take care of the budget. But the issue was that we both have different things that we view as important with spending. So the reason why that allowance thing worked for us is because we was having things where, silly things, but Canel would come to my car and just be like, oh, oh, so you bought another McDonald's, did you? Because she's seen the wrapper. Because she hates McDonald's. So for her, it's a waste of our money. But then I would see things where Canel's ordered things online, like certain clothes, and I know that we've got certain things that we're still trying to pay off. And I'll be like, oh, all right, so you bought that. Yeah, I didn't buy clothes for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
We had different priorities, and it didn't mean that one was right and one was wrong. And one way that kind of works for us, we thought, well, yeah, if we've got a little allowance, then Canel, if I want to spend all my money on McDonald's, that's on me. That was my money to spend.
I might say no by the time he becomes too
yeah,
old.
yeah, there's other problems. But and same way, if I may not think it's important to keep buying new clothes, but if that's what Canel wanted to spend, so be it. That was Canel's money to spend. It's not impacting on our overall budget. We've already made sure that bills are covered, debts are covered, bits and pieces.
Mutual goals.
Yeah. So I think just that structure, it helped us. Is there any other points? I know we spoke on that for quite a long time, and I'm happy to move on if no one's got anything else to add, but any other tips or advice you would give for finances as a married couple?
I think, what's coming through so well, so strongly, is that communication and mutual agreements. There's many models of doing the finances, which you've alluded to, and like you say, if someone's really into it and better with, keeping an eye on the figures, then let them do it. I mean, for us, I keep an eye on the finances. We're probably both spenders, we're not really, neither of us are really into really saving and that type of thing naturally, of ourselves. But I kind of, Rachel doesn't want to be thinking about the finances, but, if there'd be many a time I sort of think, right, it's time to kind of sit down with Rach and say, look, this is where we're at. We've got to kind of tighten up the belt here and be careful with this, be careful with that. We're on the same page. And she says, yeah, right, gotcha. Let's do A, B, and C, and we'll come up with a plan and that kind of approach. So, yeah, it's that kind of communication, agreeing together. And that's a great step. The rest will come.
Definitely. Well, our next question, we're getting quite deep now, and I like this because Unsubscribe, that's what we've aimed to be about. It's just having these real conversations that, people are definitely having behind the scenes, and we want to try and have these discussions now to sort of shed some light. And the question was, let me just grab it. Can you date outside of your race? And we had a specific question. I forget the way around it was, but I think it was like, can white people marry black people? But to be honest, and we discussed as a team, that is just an example of a bigger question that comes in. It's not just white and black, it's all sorts. So Jade, I'm going to ask you to sort of take us away on this one. But yeah, I mean, can you marry outside of your race?
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. That's where I'm going to start. Just look at Canel and Joel. I think that's a prime example right there. I think that's something beautiful, and they've shared some amazing things with us so far on this session. So I wanted to just go to 1 Peter verse 2:9, and it says in the New King James Version, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who have called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. And in other versions, it will say, instead of people, you are a chosen race. And I think it's really clear that God sees us as one people anyway, and we are all one. A lot of people will say, what do they say? There's only one race, the human race. And it's true in that effect. It's cheesy, but it's super true. I think it's important to be reminded that different cultures will have different opinions on things. And I think that if you are in an interracial relationship, that's one of the main things that you need to consider, that your cultures will evidently be very different, but you have to take on and have an open mind about going into those cultures. I can speak from my point of view, although, as I said in other sessions before, my husband Eddie's Nigerian and I'm Jamaican. The outside people will just see us being as
black people together as a black thing, but our cultures are so different, but the same at the same time. It's really strange. But in terms of little things, like we were thinking of names for our future children, and Eddie would explain like, yeah, if we had twins, we would have to name them this. And I'm like, no, like, I'm not naming my children those names, like those kind of things. But I had to kind of take a step back. That's his culture. That's what he's grown up in. And I have very similar things, you know, in my household there. I think as well, just kind of stepping aside, if it is a colour thing, say like, for example, a black, a white, a black and Asian, white and Asian, whatever the variants are, it's really important that when you're in those relationships, you are going to be aware that you might face some challenges, but it's also really important to see the beauty in your relationship, to see the beauty of how these two cultures can come together and make something so beautiful that can literally be shining for the glory of God. I think that's it's really, really important to take that on. Some of the more difficult things are, you know, thinking about raising children and coming to the world. How are you going to have impart both your cultures into that child? And not just that, but how are your family going to see that child, and how are you going to keep their identity, and how are you going to keep your own identity? And there's so many different questions. Ultimately, there's nothing wrong with marrying in the races, within cultures even. See, I'm saying races now because somebody said it. But it's really, really important to just remember the cultural aspects within that relationship, and just be open-minded and open-hearted about how you're going to go forward in that relationship together, and do your research for very many reasons. You know, I had to find out about Nigerian culture and how they marry, and like how the Nigerians would marry, because I had to marry, and like the whole outfit, the outwear, and I was like, whoa, this is so different to anything I've ever experienced before. But my son is mixed race, and I have to remind him, like, he's now growing up in a home where it's full of black culture, but he's also mixed race, and I need to remind him that, you know, he needs to have an idea of his cultural heritage and his identity in that as well. So it's quite deep, and I could go deeper, but I think on the surface, yes, absolutely. God sees us as one people. We can marry whoever we want in terms of the cultures and stuff like that. This guy. Why do you do that?
I go.
He's living it.
There's the man.
Sorry about that.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jade. I think, yeah, absolutely in principle, but if you're marrying into another culture, for you to be able to really be sensitive to some of the things that's particular to their cultures, it's good for you to be educated and to learn about it, so that, you know, you can honor your spouse and their family. But when we talk about culture, I'm just thinking, even if I'm from Zimbabwe, even if I were to marry a guy from Zimbabwe, my home culture, my family culture with my parents is totally different to his. So I think there's always going to be a need for us to adjust and be sensitive to other people's cultures, not like the cultures as we understand it, but their way of doing things. So it's just because you're married, even if you're married to the same quote unquote race, you know, you're still going to have to learn to adjust. So I don't think that's just because you marry someone, even if you're all the same skin tone, you're not avoiding anything per se. But yeah, I completely agree. I think it's beautiful when that happens. But just talking about it, I think the other biggest sort of question, I think, dealing with blending sort of different cultures and heritage, is the discrimination that still exists. And you know, you guys can attest to it, and who've experienced it. There is this sort of other aspect of dealing with sort of how you are received by other people in society. And I think that's the other side of being with someone from another culture. It's learning how how to keep the peace within yourself, just because people will say all sorts of things about you.
Yeah.
And so I suppose that's another follow-on question from that. So yeah, but it's interesting. But I personally agree. I think it's good and it's healthy to to marry other cultures. I have no problem with it at all. Yeah.
I think it's lovely.
Yeah.
It really is. We can learn so much.
Can you hear that out there, everyone? Tony has no problem.
But no, really, honestly, like really fantastic answer. I mean, for us living it, I would say it's the same thing. I completely agree that I think there's a big difference between race and culture that often gets, there's a gray area.
We could both be the same race, but I would be French and he would be English. We would still be completely different, still need to adjust. It's less obvious, obviously, when you don't see the color. You know, like if you're not the same color, it's obvious, and there's a lot of things that can happen, and you know, people can be bad. And thankfully, we live in a country where it's legal. Like your family comes.
My dad's South African, so like he grew up came from a country where it would have been illegal to be our relationship right now. So we're very fortunate in that aspect. But yeah, in terms of race, and Jade read out sort of something we said on a previous episode, so I won't go too deep, but long story short, the difference of our race is not something that's been an issue in our marriage at all. What we notice is the cultural differences. Not that's an issue, but there's never a situation where me as a mixed race person, Canal as a black woman, we're thinking, oh, this is just weird, we're clashing. No, it will be sometimes just a cultural, oh, your French thing and my English thing. But that's the beauty of marriage, is you're joining together two different people to become one. If you're going into marriage thinking that it's your way or no way, I mean, it's going to be a recipe for disaster anyway.
Yeah.
So,
and then like Jules said it on Jade's session, Open Heart, Open Mind. He said what would have been a very bad thing is if we didn't have the same Jesus culture, if we didn't have the same church culture. Not that we grew up in the same church, but we're one with the way we see faith. And that is for me a key point, because you could marry as a white person, a black person, and both are not equal in your faith. That would be more of a problem than your actual color, I would say, and vice versa. You could be white and black but have the same, faith and vision, and you're fine, I think.
No, completely. And like I say, I mean, my dad's a South African Indian and my mom's white British. But if I was to marry an Indian lady or a South African lady, I'd probably have way less in common than I do with Canel. We're both European. Culturally, I've been raised a certain way. I'm racially something, but culturally, I am also something as well. And that's why I think, like you're saying, Jade, the distinguishing between race and culture is a big one. And I love the verse you shared, because when it comes down to race, I mean, we're all one through Christ. There is no, I mean, it even says, doesn't it? Like, there's no Jew or Gentile anymore. There's no like male or female in that sense, as in God sees us all the same way. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not he's favoring one race above another race or bits and pieces. So really good answer. Rachel, I'm going to come to you now, if you don't mind, for our next question. And again, it's another deep one. And it's, do we think the church talks enough about abusive relationships, and is there enough support? And this question, I believe the way it was worded was churches in the broad sense, so not Bright City specifically, but just in general. Do you think the church talks enough about abusive relationships? And yeah, is there enough support out there?
I'd probably say the church doesn't talk enough about abusive relationships, and we should be talking much more about abusive relationships, and we should be much more transparent. And I think we need to be a bigger voice. I think the church needs to be a bigger voice in general when things in society are not right. And I think that we have taken a backseat actually in certain issues within society that actually need us to make a stand for. What do I think about abusive relationships? They are wrong. Of course, anyone in an abusive relationship, it's not right. And I wouldn't advise let's get that straight. Don't stay in an abusive relationship, whether it be violent, psychological, emotional, financial, and there are obviously sort of all kinds of abusive relationships. And I think sometimes people think that the church tolerate abuse because we are a tolerant, loving, kind, wonderful Christian faith. And actually, let's say right now, no, we don't. It is wrong. Those things are wrong. Abuse is wrong, and we don't tolerate those things. So should the church make a stand and be a voice? Yes. And actually, it's something that even for myself and even us at Bright City, I think we need to be much more proactive in. Because actually, if people understand that we don't tolerate it, we're more likely to get people to come and find help from us, to get help from us. And if we remain silent about it, then there may be an idea that we're not actually as sympathetic, caring. And actually, a few years ago when we were working, we run a soup kitchen, as you know, and quite often you get a lot of vulnerable adults coming through those doors. And then I remember one time there was a woman who came running through the church and she was crying her eyes out and she was saying, hide me quickly. And I was in the back room and she was black and blue. She'd been beaten up and her actual abuser had walked through the door and through the door as well of the church. And I remember thinking in that moment, what do I do? How can I help? How can I help this woman? And obviously I took her aside and we were in a room and we had coffee and the guy left, etc. But I actually in that moment thought, what can we do as a church? How can we support? And I was thinking about how, even Psalm 91, it says, God is my refuge. He is a place of safety. And we as Christians, we are ambassadors for Christ and we want to be a place of safety. We want to be a place of refuge for. And by the way, it's not just women, of course, it's men. I was actually looking at, men can be abused. And so even for myself, I had, that was a seed for me, even to sort of, as at church at Bright City, how can we be of help to people who need a safe place? And obviously you've probably heard, I've been looking at that even as looking at Women's Refuge. And in fact, at the end of the year, I actually started to do a course on domestic violence myself, because I think actually we need to educate ourselves again, with things that are happening in society. And I was reading the statistics for 2019 that 2.6 million adults in the UK, Wales and in England had experienced some kind of domestic abuse between the ages of 16 to 74. And if that's the sort of statistics, we are going to find those people in our communities. And I think the church needs to be in the community, helping the community, supporting the community, and actually learning and educating ourselves about the issues of society. And domestic violence is one of those. And so I actually started a course last year a little bit on it, just to get myself educated, because actually I was actually listening, sorry I'm going on a bit now because I'm quite passionate about this one. I was actually listening quite recently to a woman who was actually in a Christian relationship and she was being abused. So it can be in the church as well as outside of the church. And absolutely, actually, she was sort of saying that, she was married to a Christian and suffering from domestic abuse. And the problem is that we always sort of say, you need to leave, you need to get out. And she said, actually, the church needs support women, men on the process and the journey of being able to leave those abusive relationships, and actually being there. It might actually be financially, it will be emotionally, physically, and it's not just a quick answer of get out. Actually, you have to help them work through the process, and it's not a quick solution. So I think mostly we need to absolutely talk about it much more. Secondly, we need to educate ourselves much better on it, how to help, how to support, and what to do. So that's my answer in a nutshell.
Just to add, as you were saying, it can very much be in the church, and even some of the teaching of the man is head over his wife, and you will submit to me, and this type of thing can lead to abusive relationships, when it's taken totally out of context, and that's awful. So we need to make sure that we're giving right teaching,
message.
right messages, and making, you know, very easy access for those ladies even within the church who might feel, well, I am being, you know, abused and controlled in some way, that they can talk about it.
And it's very, very difficult, you know, if you're, you know, you're a Christian in a Christian marriage even, no one wants to come out. And actually, as Christian, we've got to be much more vulnerable and real and authentic. You know, let's face the things that we're all dealing with, and actually come out and be vocal. Because I think the idea is that the church has sort of been in these four walls, and it's, don't we all have perfect Christian marriages and perfect families and the perfect this and the perfect that? And actually, that's not. We've got to be more authentic. Even as the body of Christ.
Absolutely. I think as we're saying that, in my mind, I'm thinking, as well as being authentic and open, I think creating safe spaces for people to be able to come and say, this is what I'm going through, and also getting an answer beyond, let me pray, or I'll pray for you. Because sometimes that's almost like you're shutting people down, and then, okay, pray for me, but can you practically help me? I'm telling you that someone is abusing me, and you're just saying, oh, come here and pray for you, because that just, it doesn't sound like help. You know what I mean? Like, imagine someone is physically drowning and you're saying, let me pray for you. Physically help the person. If you're in the place to help, then help. Obviously, if you're not, then do something about it. I think also as Christians, like we're saying, educate yourself so that you can bring a practical solution to someone and help people. And I think I honestly believe that we're moving into a new season, even as the church, where God is actually nailing that for us as a church. Well, we've got to actually be the hands and feet. We've got to feed, we've got to support, we've actually got to do something, rather than always just, you know, let me pray for you, let me pray for you. We actually have to be proactive, you know, in the community. And we do both. Of course, there's the prayer, but actually, you know, that actually we bring solutions.
No, definitely. And I mean, it's so sad that we have to even address questions like this, but we all know that this goes on in the world. And like you were saying, Rachel, we'd be naive to think, well, us as believers, we're sort of in this little protected bubble, and almost like our prayers and our support is only for those outside, because I think we'd be naive to think that these things can't happen within the church as well. And I think it's really encouraging to hear that, you know, as a church, we're making moves forward. We're trying to make sure that it's not just about spiritually how we support people, but practically, this is what we offer. And we take a stand that things like this are not right. They're not okay. And we want the world to know this, and we want there to be support for anyone that's going through that. So I really, really appreciate the answers, everyone, on that one. Now, our next question, and Sam, I'll go to you for this one. And someone's asked, how do I get over it when someone I like gets a girlfriend/boyfriend?
Good question. So I think there's kind of two scenarios here. The first one is, did you tell them that you like them? If you didn't, and it was a kind of secret crush, then I think my advice is snooze you lose. and I think maybe there's a lesson in there for the next time is to maybe pluck up some courage, or, you know, find an opportunity to maybe tell that person, or, you know, find out what maybe they're feeling. Because I think if you keep it a secret to yourself, and then you know, someone that you've kind of secretly been crushing on find someone else, and there's not really much you can do. You know, you're not, obviously by then it is too late. You can't all of a sudden think, oh no, I'm going to tell them, because that would be the wrong thing to do in that situation. And obviously the second scenario is, you know, maybe you've made your feelings known to someone and it hasn't been reciprocated back, and then they find someone else, and then how do you deal with that? And I mean, my advice for that is, you know, I think we kind of have to wish them well, and and pray for them, and in a sense, it's kind of similar to the first one. Is we ourselves have to kind of move on from it. We can't let ourselves kind of wallow in it and get down about it, because I think that's only going to lead to maybe you missing someone else who's out there for you. When you get kind of blinkered, and maybe you thought, thought this was it, and it doesn't mean that the opportunity won't come round again. Who knows what will happen with someone, that other relationship. Maybe it could come back round, and you might have an opportunity in the future to express your feelings. But it's a tough one, and I can remember having this conversation with some of our teenagers out in Dubai. When they'd come to us and say, they'd be down. Oh, this girl I liked, she's got a new boyfriend, and I'd be like, well, did you say anything to her? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, I think that's the lesson there. And
was that your pastoral advice? Sort of, you snooze, you lose.
Well, yeah, tough love. Brutally honest with them.
Didn't Jesus say that in like John 3:11 or something like that?
and sometimes it's tough to take, right? When someone's totally honest with you, but it's true. It's people aren't mind readers. And I think definitely if you're interested in someone, or you're interested in pursuing a relationship, then it's important that you have the courage to maybe initiate a conversation, because people aren't mind readers, and the other person may not even have known how you felt about them, and how many times could it be cross wires? That person kind of moves on thinking, well, they're not interested in me, and the other person's sitting there broken inside thinking, oh no, they've got someone else. And in reality, a conversation could have put everybody on the same page. But I definitely think if it's this scenario where you have made your feelings known to someone and it hasn't been reciprocated, then it's really a case of getting to a place where wishing them well, and kind of praying that they find what they're looking for, and you kind of have to let it go and kind of move on and not let yourself get too down about it, because like I say, I think you can get yourself in a place where you'll miss your next opportunity.
I actually remember being in both those situations myself personally, and it was so peak. It was the worst feeling. But I remember being a lot much younger, like teenage days sort of thing, and kind of understanding what feelings mean. And I remember that particular that scenario when I was like, oh no, this person is no longer single. Like, should I have said something? And then I was very quick to get over it, like, oh, whatever, it's fine. But then that's me. That's for me. I was just the type of person that I was, and was never too upset for too long. But yeah, so occupy your minds with something else.
Yeah.
As well. It's always helpful. Yeah. Focus on God.
And find someone as well. Like, even if you have to find someone or find a friend or someone to break the truth to you. Sometimes we all need that in our lives, like the brutally honest friend.
Yeah.
Who we can rely on to just tell it to us how it is in certain situations.
Yeah.
And it's always good to have a friend like that. And sometimes you have to, like the answer that you're not going to get the answer you want to hear when you talk to them, but you still have to ask them, like, what do you think on this situation? and see what they think. I mean, yeah, a friend who can be brutally honest with you is a good friend to have.
Absolutely. I've been, like Jade said, I've had all sorts of scenarios, very many of those situations where you like someone and obviously they don't feel the same way, or you get with someone and you break up. I think it's all part of growing up, particularly if you're a teenager. It happens. One thing one of my friends told me is be objective. When someone is not into you and you're into them, they're not saying that there's something fundamentally wrong with you as a human being. They just don't like you. It's not that they don't, there's something wrong with you. It's just take it objectively. Like someone is saying they like red apples instead of green apples. That's just it. It doesn't take away from your identity, from your self-worth. Just be objective. That's how I've learned to try to get over it. The other thing is there's scenarios where you're talking with someone and you think that they're into you, and then you realize they're actually not into you and they get with someone else in a very short space of time. So be careful and guard your heart. And by that, please don't be careful not to assume more out of the situation than what is communicated. Because as women, we're great at that. We're great at seeing the future before it's actually happened, and then you get disappointed when you realize that's not the case. And thirdly, becoming resilient, becoming like, okay, something hasn't worked out, but get back up again, because sometimes you can stay so much in your sorrow that you miss someone who's actually good for you because you're like so hung up on what happened in the past. Like, it sounds harsh, but like keep, try and become more resilient and talk with people, because it happens. Yeah, that's a few advice. Yeah,
I think, like you were mentioning, Sam, that you can keep yourself occupied with things as well. If you have created a life that is so wrapped up and absorbed with that one person, I mean, firstly, if you've got that scenario anyway, I would say that's dangerous to try and get out of that. But that's going to feel like the end of the world for you if that person no longer wants to be with you. And who knows, it could be that you were with that person and they've broke up with you and then got with someone else. But even if that's the scenario, this world is so big. There's so many things that we can be doing with ourselves. And the more that you do, I think it's striking a balance between not just burying your head and running away from your problems, but getting out there, doing things, meeting new people. And particularly if you felt, I don't know, like you feel heartbroken or whatever, sometimes it's more just about do the action and just trust that your emotions will catch up at some point. You might be going out there meeting people and in the back of your mind you're still thinking of this person because you're heartbroken, but trust me, at some point your emotions will catch up, you'll meet new people, you'll do other things. But the more that you stay sort of wrapped up in that person that you're obsessing about, you'll never move on. It might be that you'll have the same friendship group. Maybe you need to start meeting new people to have a few different friends, and that's just, I think it applies to all things in life. It would be like if someone's single and really unhappy in their singleness and all of their friends are married couples, every day is just going to be a reminder to them that, oh, I'm not married. And I'm not saying ditch your friends, but it would be helpful if you had some single friends. Whatever your scenario is, if you're only surrounded by people that remind you of something that's making you feel bad, it's going to be harder than if you've got a variety of things that you can be occupying yourself in. And like Jay said, number one, give it to God. Use that time. The more that you feel comfortable and confident in your relationship with God, the less I think these things will, what's the word? They'll still impact you, but they're not going to drag on as long as it could do for other people. All right, final question that we've got here then is, what if you have different political views for valid reasons? And I'll sort of take us away with this one first, but then please feel free to chip in after, because I think it's a very interesting question. And I want to sort of break this one down into two parts, because there's a little addition to this question that I found interesting. So what if you have different political views for valid reasons? So number one, I would say we've sort of touched on it with different aspects of relationships. What if you date outside your race? What if all these kind of things? And I would say different political views aren't a reason necessarily to not be with someone. The reason being, as we've said, I believe Christ, as believers, Christ is the head. He's who we submit to. Now, underneath that, I don't think that one political view represents Christ
Yeah.
with all authority. So I don't believe that just because you have different political views, one of you is a strong believer in Christ, the other one of you is not necessarily. But what I would say is that particularly if you're in like a dating stage, or you've met someone and you think this person fundamentally has different political views to me, it's worth having that discussion and considering, because if you're getting in a marriage where you're gonna, like we've been saying, unite with someone, almost you're trying to be a team and go through life together, and you fundamentally can't agree with certain things with that person, it's going to make your marriage very, very difficult. Now, it's a tricky one because, like I said, I don't think in the way I see it is, I don't think you have to agree politically with everything. But for some people, it might mean way more to them. And if you know that I can't be with someone that doesn't agree with my political thoughts, what I would say is don't assume that, oh, that will just sort itself out within the marriage. And I think I'll use the political example, but this happens in so many different situations. I think people pick up what you would call like red flags within relationships, but I think have this notion that it's all right though, but once we're married, it will sort itself out. And more times what I see happen is what that person's really thought is it will sort itself out because they will come around to my way of thinking. It's still risky, but if you're deep down thinking it will sort itself out because probably I will reassess my beliefs and I'm willing to be more open. But I don't think that's what people think when they do that. What they're thinking is, no, I know what I believe. This person doesn't, but chances are the more time you spend with me, the more I get to say what I feel, you're going to start believing. That person might have the same mindset, and then you're going to be married, you may have kids, you may have all these other things involved, and then you're realizing, I hate this person, I can't stand them. So that would be my advice if you're not together, is if you do have really different political views and it's a big deal for you, consider it. If it's not that much of a big deal for you, for me, that's no reason to not get married with someone. The second point I want to touch on is because they say, what if you have different political views for valid reasons? And I just want to mention that because my question would be to this person is, who has the authority to say for valid reasons? What standpoint are you coming on? And I'll give a very quick example, and this might sound controversial. I'm not looking to get in heavy debates with the viewers, but obviously political things came up a lot with the American election just gone. And I was seeing loads of stuff passed around online within Christian circles as well about like, no, we're for Trump because of X, Y, Z. No, we're for Biden because of X, Y, Z. And it was coming across to me that, wait, a lot of these people, it's almost like Trump and Biden have gone on the same level as Jesus Christ, as in whoever you choose is your savior. And I said this as a half joke, half serious, but from what I saw, if you were genuinely saying, no, you can only be for this person because they're representing what Christ would want. I saw that Kanye West was running as an independent and he was overtly saying, I'm a believer in Christ and I follow Christ. So then my question would be, why did you not all vote for Kanye West? But everyone laughs because everyone's thinking, no, it's not that simple. Kanye West wouldn't be president. So that's my point. Be careful, like what's really your motive? Like if you're saying only certain views are in line with Christ and therefore that's valid, and if you don't, you're not valid. I think be careful because Jesus himself said, make sure you take care of the whole plank of wood in your own eye before you try and remove a speck from someone else's. So for that second part, that's what I would say is if you genuinely are feeling that my points are valid, what do I do? Because this other person does not see my valid point. Before you even start getting into questioning of like, how do I deal with different views in a relationship? Number one, put the mirror to your own face and just really consider, why do I have the authority to say that my views are valid over the other person? And I think if you can do that in a relationship, you're on a way to success, because that should hopefully allow you to have that discussion, but in an open way. I don't believe there's anything wrong. Me and Canel don't agree with stuff all the time. But what I try not to do is come at Canel as in like, you're an idiot. This is what I believe. So we've got a problem until you start seeing it my way, and vice versa. And a lot of times we have discussions and debates and it ends with us still being in the same place of like, cool, still think what I think, you still think what you think. Doesn't mean we can't be married, and it doesn't mean that as a marriage, as we present ourselves, we can't be united. And that's another thing I'll just kind of leave it on is, I think that's the key thing with marriage is your marriage is precious, and how you present that to the world, you don't want it to be fake and false, and you want to have people you can confide in and be real. But I would say it's unadvisable to just present a very fractured marriage to the world. And it's okay to know between yourselves that you've got different opinions and things you're still working on. But you ideally want to get to a point where you think, cool, we're dealing with this as a married couple, but once we present ourselves in public, we're united. I've got your back, you've got my back, and anything else, we'll work on that behind the scenes. So that's...
You can create your own thing, because like no political party and no political figure is a perfect person. We're all human, and no one is Jesus, like Joel said. So if we have to vote, that's the thing. So we just have to choose someone, and we all trust that we pray for it. And it may be that I pray for something and I feel peaceful about someone, and Joel prays and feels peaceful about someone else. But at the end of the day, it's my choice as well. But saying that, then create your own thing when you're married as well. If there are things that you disagree with because you're thinking of things that already exist or examples of people, then just scratch it and create your own thing, your own scenario, your own, if it's about education, create your own views about it as a married couple. If it's about a specific issue, just, but that will affect, I don't know, the way you raise your children or the way you do things in marriage, just create your own thing. That's the beauty of marriage as well. You can just create your own kind of bubble and thing. And the Bible also says, let no man come between what God has united. So don't let any political figure or anyone or anything, that represents something in this world come between you in the marriage, because that's just not good at all.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel and I recently had a very rare bit of a bust up, bit of a humdinger, and it was over Harry and Meghan. And
we won't start it here.
But no, we won't.
We shall end it there.
We came to the conclusion we could still be married.
I'm right.
And we got 30 years behind us. This can go on. So, no, in all seriousness, yeah, it's bigger than that. We're bigger than that.
We're bigger than that.
It would be a shame for Harry, Meghan, and Oprah to break you two up. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's agree to disagree. I think someone mentioned it recently on one of the broadcasts. Maybe Charlotte, I think. But yeah, Charlotte and Sam talked about communication and resolving conflict in marriage, and I think this could become conflict. We've seen it, but just agree to disagree, guys. If it's genuinely not like a life or death, or in both sense, like you're not going to die physically or spiritually because of that, genuinely just let it go.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else that has got anything to add to that question? Perfect. So that kind of brings us to the end of
we have Charlotte
this Q&A. Yeah, so we've got Charlotte, and the only reason I've been a bit quiet is because at the minute I'm unsure in my head whether hers will come first or at the end. So once we go live, that will be obvious. But yeah, we also have a question that Charlotte's going to be answering. She couldn't be with us, unfortunately. She's not feeling too good, isn't it, Sam? And baby reasons.
Yeah. Chloe wasn't settling down for sleep tonight, so she's been busy trying to get her settled. Yeah,
so mother duties as well. They have to come up and unsubscribe. But yeah, I just want to say big thanks to everyone that's jumped on the Zoom for giving up your time, and even for me being a part of this, I've really enjoyed the answers that everyone's given, and it's been really insightful. And for everyone watching, I really hope and pray that it's also been useful. Same with the relationship series as a whole, that you've all really got something from it. And again, just because the series is finished doesn't mean that if you've got questions you can't answer. You can always feel free to sort of get in touch with us, let us know. We're always after ideas for new episodes, and we want to be really talking about what you lot want to hear. So again, if there's other things to do with relationships or bits that we've touched on, feel free. If anything that we've touched on also has hit close to home for whatever reason, remember, you can always contact us via the church. Ian, maybe if you could like share sort of the best contact details for anyone wanting to get in touch with the church for anything.
Yeah, I mean, you could email Bright City Church at info@brightcitychurchuk.com. That's an easy way. Or you could private message the Facebook page, and that will come through to the leadership as well.
Brilliant. Cool. Thanks, Ian. Well, I'm going to end the recording now. And I just want to say, yeah, big thanks to everyone. And we'll catch everyone again on the next Unsubscribe.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for
We're back.
Wow. Thank you for anyone that's been with us, from beginning to end. We appreciate your time.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long one, but I think a good one.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe I'm biased, but I think it was a good one.
We're biased, but I think the comments as well have shown that it's been really useful for some of the things. I think it was quite good to also have Ian and Rachel there so we could get that perspective on certain things. So yeah, if you guys have been, some of these questions or answers have talked to you and you need more, just feel free to contact us. We've got the contact details there.
Yep.
And and then also, if you are someone that is in a very hard situation, like an abusive relationship, for example, we touched on that earlier, please reach out. We really want to be there for you. Rachel shared about she's going through training for that. I think she's a really good person to reach out. So again, just putting it again there, just reach out to us so that we can help you, because we want to be there for you.
Yeah. Right, we're off to get some food because I'm starving.
And I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
Next week
Thanks so
we are
much for
back
joining us.
with Sam and Charlotte. So please make sure that you hit some like buttons so that we can see more people, and also see you next week.
See ya. Well, that was an awkward bye. See ya.